After months of speculation, the Ottawa Senators now have a new owner. A group led by Toronto billionaire Michael Andlauer has won the bidding war. According to Post Media, the bid is worth close to $950 million US. That's the highest price ever paid for an NHL team. Andlauer currently owns a minority share of the Montreal Canadiens and is a member of the NHL's Board of Governors. As a result of his successful bid, the 57-year-old will have to sell his 10% share in the Habs organization. Andlauer is responsible for putting together a group of investors for his bid, but is believed to have controlling interest. A condition of the sale is that the team must stay in Ottawa. Now, in a statement, the Ottawa Senators say, quote, an entity controlled by Michael Andlauer has entered into an agreement to purchase 90% and operational control of the Ottawa Senators Hockey Club. Anna and Olivia Melnick, through the Melnick estate, will retain a 10% interest in the club. Now, Andlauer also releasing a statement as part of that release today saying, quote, my family and I are very excited to be part of the Ottawa Senators Hockey Club. I believe that the Senators fan base is one of the most passionate in the league, and I'm excited to take the franchise's success both on and off the ice to the next level. It continues. The short and long-term future of the team is already incredibly bright, and I look forward to getting to know the team, the fan base, and the community. Chief Anchor Graham Richardson joins us now to talk about this. Graham, finally we have an answer, but clearly a very big story just for the entire city today.
Well, yeah, on the news side, Matt, aside from hockey, and I know you're going to talk about the hockey side in a minute, but on the news side, we've got a confirmation of a deep pockets owner with a local ownership partnership group, including the co-CEO of Farm Boy, Jeff York. We've got the Malhotra family from Claridge confirmed as well. Interesting on the Claridge side as well, because when you're talking about a downtown arena on LeBreton Flats, there's been talk about residential construction as well. So those are strong local names, and everything everyone says about Andlauer, the deep connections he has with the NHL, you don't become a partial owner of the Montreal Canadiens unless you are in the NHL club. He is in the NHL club, and many people talking about the positive news here that a big, serious player has bought or is agreed in principle to buy the Ottawa Senators.
And it does feel like that familiarity factor, too, a lot of the time, weighed in heavily to possibly to this decision when there were multiple bids clearly on the table and, according to Post Media, close to $1 billion US.
Lots of flash from other groups, which is understandable, and not much publicly from him. So in politics, it's those who know don't say anything, and those out of the know spend a lot of time talking. I'm not saying those other groups are like that, but the fact that there was not a lot from the Andlauer side suggested maybe some confidence there as well. The other thing we have to all keep in mind is that I grew up during the Harold Ballard years. I covered Peter Pocklington and the Edmonton Oilers, and the instability of ownership. Every ownership situation is different. I'm not running down the Melnick family because it's not easy to own a hockey team, but a fair criticism of that time is that it was somewhat chaotic. And I think that hockey fans and hockey people are hoping for, if not boring ownership, calm ownership and normal ownership. And I think the signal from the NHL, signal from everybody talking about this Andlauer person, is that he's a serious hockey person, and that is what we're going to get, which will be very, very interesting over the next few years.
We don't want to get too far ahead of ourselves. This is clearly big news, but now the other big part of this becomes LeBreton, right? And becomes now Andlauer is going to be the new owner. What do you foresee as now preferred bidder when it comes to LeBreton? Is it still, we're going to wait for a few weeks now?
I just cannot get over the fact that 500 meters from Parliament Hill, there's empty land. I'm sorry. It's just beyond. It's beyond. You can literally look across the river and see Gatineau. Thousands of fans, thousands of people working beside an empty lot on the river with a gorgeous museum sitting there, and now an LRT line running through it. So I think the obvious thing is to get a deal there, and this would likely be part of that. It'll be very exciting if that's the case. Okay,
Graham's going to stick around for us, but we're going to get into this too. Some details on the career of the new Senators owner, Michael Andlauer. He becomes the fourth owner of the Ottawa Senators since the club returned to the league back in 1992. The 57-year-old is the founder and CEO of Andlauer Healthcare Group, which handles logistics and pharmaceuticals and healthcare. He's also the founder of Bulldog Capital Partners, a Toronto-based merchant bank. He's a minority owner, as we mentioned, of the Montreal Canadiens, the Bell Centre, and Gillette Entertainment Group. Again, he will have to sell that stake in the Canadiens. He also owns the Bulldogs franchise of the Ontario Hockey League, who currently play out of Hamilton. Now, Andlauer's group includes many partners. Graham just mentioned this too, including several prominent Ottawa business people. Farm Boy co-CEO Jeff York and the Malhotra family, owners of Claridge Homes, are part of that group. Post Media reporting that York also has more than 20 other partners to be part of the ownership. Again, so Graham is still here. Want to bring in John Rodenberg now, TSN 1200 program director from TSN Mornings. JR, your initial thoughts too, hearing this. We finally, again, after a long, lengthy search, it felt like we have an answer, but from the hockey side of things, what does this mean today?
Well, this is going to be really interesting over the next few days, weeks, months. It'll be a matter of how long it takes to get through the legal paperwork and then final approval from the Board of Governors. And then there's been talk that perhaps there could be some changes on the hockey operations side. Perhaps it comes too late in the game for something to happen this summer, where they may get into next year. That'll be one of the first questions that I think that Michael Andlauer, whenever we hear from him the first time, he's going to have to answer is what it means. And, you know, a star player like Alex DeBrincat, what's to come from him? He, it was intimated that he wanted to hear who the new owner was going to be before he decided if he was going to stay in Ottawa or not. So now that we know the name, does that change things? So many questions, not a lot of answers so far.
Right, and I guess that's part of the thing right now too, because, you know, coincidentally or not, Patrick Waugh today resigning as head coach of the Quebec Remparts after winning the Memorial Cup. I'm not saying and making any connection, but certainly...
Well, many are.
Right, yeah, some people are, but it certainly does feel, when we talk about the hockey side of things, that there could be the possibility of change coming.
Absolutely. Management, general manager, coach, I think everything's on the table. And look, Michael Andlauer has been involved in this for several months, so I think it'd be folly to suggest that now he's going to start to decide what he's going to do. I'm sure, he's been planning, behind the scenes, either talking to people or just thinking himself, if I actually eventually do win the bid, what am I going to do, if anything, with the hockey operation side of things?
Right, and again, this can't be, I'm sure Gary Bettman, it was brought up, I think, last day, possibly the Stanley Cup being handed out tonight.
Right.
Not ideal timing, but we finally have an answer here locally, I think is also the biggest thing at this point. Graham, I just want to ask you, though, too, as we get into this and we talked about it and some of these changes that we could see over the next few weeks, as fans start to learn about this, we're going to have some fan reaction from just here in a second. Do you think finally to put this to bed, now move forward, is finally, again, at that point?
Yeah, it's a positive thing. JR's being polite. DJ Smith and Pierre Dorion, are they going to stay? That I don't know. Maybe, but maybe not. And those are decisions that'll come obviously from a new ownership group. What's the structure of this business-wise, right? How big is the local the local group going to be? And how much of a boss is Andlauer going to be? It sounds like you don't spend that kind of money to
hands-on guy,
and a hockey person, a hockey person, and apparently a beer league goalie, I hear.
Yes.
So all of that, you think about the other bids, the Americans, and the high profile like Snoop Dogg and everything. That was a lot of excitement, but as you point out, here is someone who knows the NHL and knows Gary Bettman.
I want to ask you, too, that hands-on hockey part of this, though, too, and really getting involved. For people that might be worried as we talk about local partners and otherwise, it sounds like he's going to be the boss and he's going to be making these calls.
Absolutely. He's the majority owner, or it appears to be. And I think all along there was talk that the group that dropped out last Friday, Steve Apostolopoulos, that at one point they talked about joining together on a bid. And I think, look, when you got that much money and you got that much drive and that much will, somebody wants to be the majority owner. And if you're not the majority owner and you're putting a lot, hundreds of millions of dollars into it, but you don't have final say, for a lot of people, especially people with that kind of wealth, it's like, well, no, I want to be the guy.
And quickly to my previous point, with that majority owner last time, Mr. Melnick was hands-on in a way that many people felt was negative in terms of the hockey operation. And it sounds like he's going to be hands-on, but he's also going to let people do their jobs. You can't be successsul in this league unless you let people do their jobs, because there's lots of pros around who know what they're doing.
Yeah.
And so it'll be really interesting to see, he's a boss, and he's new ownership, But is he going to let people do their jobs? And I would hope he would for the success of the franchise.
And who else is brought into this process?
Right.
So clearly the beginning of this story today. Graham, thank you. JR, appreciate this. Want to get to, we talked about fan reaction. We're hearing from them. Reporters out in our field for us today. Here's some of the very first reaction today.
Yeah. I would very much like to hear the news.
The Sens got sold to Michael Andlauer.
What? No.
Oh my goodness.
I can't believe it. Really? It's been sold? You texting people? No, yeah, I was just texting my husband.
I'm happy because, you know what, like, I feel that they'll be able to do something better, like put the team downtown where it's more accessible to the rest of the world.
As long as they're passionate and they keep the Sens here in Ottawa, then that's awesome.
Well, some were hoping to have the star power of Ryan Reynolds. Graham mentioned Snoop Dogg part of the mix. They say they are relieved the ownership saga has now come to an end.